Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kelly O'Donnell in Washington. At this hour, we are closely following breaking news out of Jamaica, where Hurricane Melissa made landfall just a few hours ago, at that time at a Category 5, making it the most powerful storm to hit the island in its recorded history, with winds of up to 185 miles an hour. Now, the storm was just downgraded a moment ago to a Category 4 and is right now still packing winds of up to 150 miles per hour. It's projected to pass over Montego Bay, a popular tourist destination. And officials are warning of catastrophic flooding, landslides, and severe damage caused by the high wind gusts. We'll have a live report coming from Jamaica in just a moment, and the very latest on the path of this historic and deadly storm. But first, we turn to President Trump's overseas trip, where he is touting his robust and at times questionable use of executive power, and particularly with the U.S. military, whether that is legal, to advance his agenda at home and abroad. The president is in Japan right now as part of his 5-day visit to the region, where he met today with Japan's newly elected prime minister, the first woman to ever hold that office. But it was the president's address to a gathering of U.S. troops that is drawing scrutiny, as the commander-in-chief delivered a campaign-style speech that veered at times into partisan politics.
Unlike past administrations, we will not be politically correct. You don't mind that, do you? When it comes to defending the United States, we're no longer politically correct. We're going to defend our country any way we have to, and that's usually not the politically correct way.
During his remarks, the president laid out how he views the military's role in achieving some of his top priorities, starting with the crackdown on drugs flowing into the U.S., saying the U.S. is now at war with cartels.
We've been watching what our missiles do to boats and ships and submarines. How about the submarine? For many years, the drug cartels have waged war in America, and at long last, we're finally waging war on the cartels. We're waging war like they'd never seen before. And we're going to win that battle.
And as part of that escalation, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing 3 more overnight strikes targeting 4 vessels allegedly trafficking narcotics. Hegseth says 14 people were killed, while 1 survivor was rescued by Mexican authorities. Now, this brings the total of the number of reported strikes against alleged drug cartels to 13, with at least 57 people killed. As we've noted before, some in Congress have raised concerns about the administration's transparency around these lethal strikes and questioned the legality. In his remarks to troops, the president also laid out his vision to use the military here at home, suggesting he could escalate deployments to Democratic-run cities, although we should remind viewers that under current law, the military cannot be used for domestic law enforcement.
You know, people don't care. If we send in our military, if we send in our National Guard, if we send in Space Command, they don't care who the hell it is. They just want to be safe. We're going to have beautiful, safe cities, and it's happening very quickly and very easily, actually. It's easy for us. It's hard for them. And we have to have a little more help. It doesn't matter, really. We can do as we want to do, but it would be nice to have more help from some of the Democrat governors. We have cities that are troubled. We can't have cities that are troubled. And we're sending in our National Guard. And if we need more than the National Guard, we'll send more than the National Guard, because we're going to have safe cities. We're not going to have people killed in our cities. And whether people like that or not, that's what we're doing.
It comes as the Trump administration is planning to revamp ICE leadership in an attempt to accelerate its mass deportation efforts. And joining me now, NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake is in Tokyo. And with me on set here are NBC News senior national security correspondent Kornacki and NBC News senior homeland security correspondent Julia Ainsley. So welcome, welcome. Garrett, let me start with you, since you've probably had less sleep than all of us combined. What did you make of the president's speech to U.S. troops and how he is describing the role of the military?
Well, I think your description of it as a campaign-style speech is wholly appropriate, Kelly. There's no substantive difference between the way that the president addresses an audience of soldiers or sailors or one of his supporters on the campaign trail. It's a sharp break from the traditional norms in which the manner in which the commander-in-chief would typically deal with the military abroad. It was all about domestic issues, domestic politics, not a lot of, sort of credit necessarily towards the military or focus on military issues. The White House loves the backdrop that these events provide. They love the visuals. And it's not the first time he's done this. I was there at Al Udeid Air Base over the summer when the president gave a similarly partisan speech in Qatar. I expect we will see more of this going forward with no functional mechanism to get the president to do it any other way.
And the president started his day in Tokyo meeting with the new prime minister. That's a new relationship. What are your takeaways? What did you read from how they interacted?
Look, the Japanese government very much wanted this meeting to go well. This was the first foreign leader bilateral meeting of this type of any kind for this new prime minister, starting with President Trump as a pretty high degree of difficulty there. And she was obviously well coached in the manner in which to approach Trump as a foreign leader. There was the giving of gifts, the expression of familiarity around former Prime Minister Abe, who was really arguably Donald Trump's best friend in the political, sort of foreign sphere during his first term, and a lot of flattery and use of his language, talking about a golden age of U.S.-Japanese relations. The announcements around a critical minerals partnership and a little bit more specifics about this investment fund that Japan plans to fund in the United States were kind of small-ish steps towards finalizing this trade deal that's been in place since the previous government was in control here in Tokyo. But in terms of the personal relationship, I think both governments would say things got off on a very strong footing yesterday.
And it seems she got the memo as you outlined some of the key takeaways of how to relate to this president. We also know that what is coming up is a very high-stakes meeting with the president of China. That'll be at the end of the trip. And it's really the main event in many ways. What are you expecting and what are you hearing about how that is shaping up?
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about this is kind of the degree of difficulty increasing along with the size of the economies involved as each stop has progressed on this tour for the president. With China, there's just so many issues that are set to be discussed. I think you'll probably see some effort to have what we would call deliverables in the short term, whether that's the purchase of more American farm products or perhaps some movement on a TikTok deal, something that could be kind of tangible for the American public to come out of this meeting. But remember, Kelly, this won't be the last meeting between these two men in the near term. There's already discussions about another meeting that could come as soon as January or early February in China. So in terms of kind of a finalized full spectrum trade deal, I would be very surprised if we get there. But in this case, there has been a lot of spade work done by the Treasury Secretary and other U.S. officials to make sure that there is some serious economic progress made in these talks before they begin on Thursday.
We appreciate all of that. We know you'll follow all the developments. Thank you, Garrett. And let me turn, Courtney, now to you. We have talked about how it was not all that unusual for this president to address troops in the way he did, but it is unusual in the sweep of how presidents normally interact when the military is intended to be apolitical. What were your takeaways, and did you see anything in the faces of service members or those who were in the audience that tells you how they received it?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that this is so striking is not just the fact that, yes, as Garrett mentioned, we've seen President Trump do this at Al Udeid only a few months ago. But when a president is standing overseas, in this case, he was on the USS George Washington, just south of Tokyo, at a U.S. military base there, that is sending a different signal. When he's standing on foreign soil or standing at a U.S. military installation, it is projecting power. And in this case, it is exactly what you were just talking about ahead of his meeting with President Xi of China. It's projecting power. But at the same time, he was talking about his complaints about domestic politics and policies. And so it's a difficult position to put the men and women who are standing right behind him on screen there. to put them in, because technically they are supposed to be apolitical. They are not supposed to react. We saw that very much on display at Quantico a couple of weeks ago when we had admirals, generals, and senior NCOs in there trying the best to stay completely straight-faced. The majority of the troops in there that I saw in the speech maintained that with polite clapping and applause when they should, but it puts them in a pretty tough position to be there, especially on foreign soil.
And we think of this as being peacetime, but it's also a time of some very active military operations that are sort of stretching what we think of in terms of should the Congress be involved? What are the questions about the legality? I'm referring to, of course, the strikes on these boats. So another round of these. And where do you think this is headed? Is this expanding?
Yes, it is expanding, it has expanding, and it is not ending anytime soon. We should expect to continue to see strikes like this. So what has evolved just in the last week, which is remarkable to talk about, is they have expanded out into the Eastern Pacific. All four of the strikes, or all four of the boats that were hit yesterday, were all in the Eastern Pacific. Why that's important is initially President Trump and the people around him were talking about boats coming out of Venezuela. Well, Eastern Pacific is not Venezuela. It's potentially Colombia, potentially Ecuador. It could still be some of the same groups, but still, it's potentially different citizens, right? And that brings to another thing that has now happened in the last week or so. We've had 3 individuals survive these strikes, including one yesterday.
Which is remarkable.
Remarkable.
Yes.
Especially the one yesterday, what we know so far is the Mexican Navy and Coast Guard were closer by. They were able to fish him out of the water, bring him to Mexico. At this point, it's not clear whether he's a Mexican citizen or not. We don't believe he is, but it's not clear, or what's going to happen to him. But what is really remarkable is the pace has really picked up in the last week or so, and officials are telling me that we should expect that to continue.
And Julia, let's bring you into this conversation. We were talking about the president expressing some of his concerns about domestic matters, and you have been covering some of the sort of discontent with how the domestic operation is going with ICE, with CBP, and are they making enough arrests to satisfy the White House? What are you learning?
It's really part of the same conversation we're having here with Courtney, and it's about power for the president. And this is domestic power. And the way he sees it when it comes to his immigration agenda is that ICE is simply not arresting the numbers, and they're not using tactics that are powerful enough and loud enough to catch the attention like Border Patrol is doing. When you see those videos that have gone viral, the ones that have caused sharp public backlash, the ones that have actually gotten this administration into court to face questions about excessive use of force, that's by and large not ICE, it's Border Patrol. And
that's the desirable outcome they're looking for?
It appears to be so. And the evidence of that is in the shift that we saw just yesterday. As we reported, the White House has blessed a plan now where over half of the regional directors of ICE will be replaced, and over half of those will be replaced by Border Patrol. Some people who are retired, some people who are being pulled in from other sectors, many who don't have experience with conducting operations internally in the United States. It would be more down at the border where they've operated. And this is because the White House likes the tactics they're seeing from Border Patrol and not some of the tactics from ICE that are more targeted towards certain people.
And changing leadership in the midst of these operations presents all kinds of challenges, doesn't it?
Right. And not the first time they've done it. Of course, Trump fired the first ICE director to come on just a few months into the administration. We know there are lots of mix-ups that happen behind the scenes, and that's all normal when you have a president who makes something their top priority. They want it to be done correctly. But this shift is not to say, Border Patrol, you're going too far. It's actually to say, we like that and we want to see more of it.
They, of course, are federal agents, but the president also frequently talks about the use of the National Guard or military. How do you see this playing into it? And obviously there are some bright lines where you can't cross, but what is your sense of how that is moving?
Right. Well, those bright lines are enshrined in the Constitution under Posa Comitatus that the military can't enforce the law domestically unless Trump declares an insurrection act, that we are under an insurrection. That was floated previously. And it seemed that he was talking about using, he said, more than the National Guard in that speech in Japan. So the question is, how is he going to use the National Guard? We've already seen them in L.A. and Chicago and D.C. We've seen them in Portland. He has plans to go into Memphis. But could he do that in tandem just to help ICE as he's done previously? Or is it a broader crackdown on crime? And would would he consider going further as to use the Insurrection Act?
And do you get signals from some of the cities? I know you check in, you're looking for where could things go next. Are you getting any signs that there could be an expansion to other cities?
You know, what's funny, and I don't know if Courtney experiences this as well, is sometimes cities, even the people whose very boots would be on the ground, don't find out about things until they hear it from the president himself.
Wow, that says a lot about the moment we're in.
That's right.
Thank you both for terrific reporting. Great to spend some time with you two. And coming up, the very latest will be from Jamaica. We've talked about the hurricane. We're going to bring you all of that. Melissa slammed into the island nation as one of the most powerful storms ever to make landfall, with residents facing catastrophic flooding and wind speeds approaching 200 miles an hour. We'll have a live report from inside the storm zone coming up next. Plus, where the deadly hurricane is headed, we'll have a forecast. And right now, you're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We are continuing to track Hurricane Melissa as it bears down on Jamaica. The storm making landfall just a few hours ago as a Category 5, the highest level. The strongest storm to hit the island since record keeping began there 174 years ago. It struck with winds estimated to be 185 miles per hour, making it tied for the second most powerful Atlantic hurricane ever recorded. Jamaica is expected to experience widespread wind damage and flooding, with forecasters predicting up to 30 inches of rain and a storm surge of up to 13 feet. Of course, while all of this is happening, preparations are underway in other parts of the Caribbean, where Melissa is also expected to hit. In Cuba, many people have evacuated on the east side of the island and moved to higher ground. Melissa is expected to hit the island as a Category 4 hurricane. NBC News correspondent George Solis joins me now from Kingston, Jamaica, and also with us is NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns. And, of course, George, I just want to acknowledge you have been out in these conditions from early in the morning to late at night. I know you must be exhausted. So, first of all, just some support going your way for how hard this is. Can you just give us a sense of what you're experiencing on the ground right now? What are the conditions?
Yeah, Kelly. So let's kind of set the stage here, because we are in Kingston. Fortunately, it missed the brunt of Melissa's wrath. We know we are still dealing with those tropical force storm winds. And just being out here, you do see those occasional strong gusts that may look like they're moving me around. The rain here is really the other factor in this storm. We are going to see rain in the double digits across the island, and that is a big concern when we talk about the infrastructure, when we talk about the roadways, when we talk about getting help to people, which is a point we'll touch on here in a second. Most people appearing to heed the warning from officials. Everyone was told that this storm was going to be serious, it was going to be devastating, and unfortunately, that appears to have come to pass. This is a historic day for the Caribbean and for Jamaica in particular. We have been talking with officials nonstop here about what their plans are and what they are going to be once this storm passes. They've been dealing with hurricanes here for a long time, as you set up. The last big one here was Beryl last year. They've told me that they have been able to sort of come up with a playbook to stage resources where necessary once this storm passes. One very critical piece of information that we heard earlier in a briefing was that they believe the airport here in Kingston may be able to reopen tomorrow, pending an assessment of any damage, to allow some of those relief flights to start bringing in some of those necessities for those people that are going to be devastated by this hurricane. On the other side of the island, on the north side, you have some of those famous resorts that we all know and have heard about. That is where so many tourists are dealing with Melissa right now. We have been in contact with some of them, but we now know a lot of them have lost power, have lost cell service. Officials obviously know that they are going to have to assess that area once the storm has passed and it is safe to do so. But again, make no mistake, what we've seen here, and we're not even done with the storm yet, has just been nothing that I have seen covering hurricanes before. And obviously, we are still very early on in the stages of assessing what this storm is going to leave behind in its wake. Kelly?
And it's always the case that there's a big delay, a gap between the worst of the worst experience and when people can get in to look at damage, to get a sense of what's coming next. Part of the reason it's helpful to have you in a place that's not being pounded right now is the television works, so we can make this connection, so you can give us your firsthand report. What are officials telling you about what they expect to unfold in the next couple of days? You indicated maybe getting the airport. Are there other things in terms of fanning out to try to reach people in the hardest hit areas?
Yeah, right now we are trying to get that assessment from the officials here on the ground. We know that they have a number of resources that are ready to be deployed, including assets like the Cajun Navy that will be here to help with any kind of rescues, any kind of help with people that may need it, that may end up getting stranded. The hope is that a lot of people went to those emergency shelters that were open here across the island and had a safe place to ride out this storm. But given that there are so many unknowns at this point about what conditions are going to look like once the storm passes, particularly where the storm made its landfall along that path that it's going to follow, make no mistake, it's really just in the early stages, Kelly.
Well, I certainly wish you good luck with all of this. I know you're not going to be dry anytime soon, but I hope there's some chance for you to get a little rest. Thank you so much, George. Appreciate it. And Bill, let me turn to you now. What is the bigger concern? Is it the potential of what the rain can do, or is it the wind?
I think at this point, we're at the end of the rain. Most of the rain damage has probably already occurred, especially on the eastern end of the island. Now we're still watching, it's a strong Category 4 near the top of Montego Bay, which is, 90,000 people live there. That's where the other main airport is. They're hoping to use that as like a place to get resources in once we're done with the storm. So, it's a big key is what that airport looks like when we're done, how long it's going to take to get flights resuming there, just to either get people out that didn't evacuate or to get aid in. So that's Montego Bay that we're talking about right here. And you can see the latest position at the top of the hour is almost over the top of Montego Bay. So whatever is left of the eye is right over the top of there doing extreme damage. I'm sure the windows are blowing out on hotels. Roofs are probably flying off. Concrete structures, they'll be standing, they'll be fine. But a lot of other material and stuff blowing all over the place. So this did tie Dorian for the strongest winds at landfall that we've ever had recorded in the Atlantic. We've had stronger storms, but not at landfall. And the same went for the pressure at landfall, tied for the strongest ever. So we're going to watch the storm from here heading off the coast. In about an hour, 2 hours from now, the eye will be completely off the coast and heading towards Cuba. And then the winds will slowly come down. It's going to take a while. Later tonight at 9 p.m., it's still in the 20 to 40 mile per hour range. But when everyone wakes up tomorrow, you should have some mix of sunny skies, some clouds here and there. But the winds will be light enough. They'll be able to get some helicopters up there to get some assessment of what areas need and how quickly they need it. Rainfall, another couple inches here or there, but as I mentioned, the worst of the rain is over with. So for tonight, one of the questions is, how quickly can the storm try to get organized again? After it gets off the coast here of Jamaica, it's over warm water once again, and the Hurricane Center still has it making landfall after midnight, about 2 to 3 a.m. in areas of Cuba. So, this cone of uncertainty still does include Santiago de Cuba. This is a pretty big city here. Now, to the west of here, where they have the center line, this is not populated. A couple small towns, not even that many. It's a very mountainous area. So that would be best case scenario, but we have to make sure we don't get any shifts to the east. And then tomorrow at this time, we're watching the storm going through the southern Bahamas. And then finally, by the time we get to Thursday, the storm even scares Bermuda. And we'll have to wait and see how close that gets. So just because Jamaica's still getting the brunt of it, Kelly, we still got Cuba, the Bahamas, and Bermuda all still to be threatened by this hurricane in the next 48 hours.
And when you look at that pathway, do you think there'll be some lesser effects that would be on the continental U.S.?
For the East Coast and for anywhere in the U.S., we're going to get some rogue waves from this in a couple of days, and that'll be about it. This storm, thankfully, is not going to cause any problems for the East Coast. And, there is a nor'easter, Kelly, and if you check online, we've had about 4 homes collapse on the Outer Banks once again from the beach erosion. So we have our own problems here, but not related to Melissa.
Appreciate it so much, Bill. Thank you. And we have the opportunity now to speak with someone who is right there in it. I want to introduce you to Peter Kong. He lives in Georgia, but he's stranded in Jamaica with his family. And thank you so much for being able to just sort of let us know what's going on with you. Give me a sense of what are you experiencing right now?
So the winds are gradually getting, since we spoke earlier to you guys, the winds are gradually getting stronger and stronger. Also, the rain has not let up. I do see a little bit of pool in the water outside my hotel room, but stronger and stronger winds, as it gets closer to us.
How has this been to go through it? Have you ever had any experience like this? Are you concerned about sort of your own safety or just the kind of hardship of going through it?
My main concern is the safety of my family. Once we get through, when we get through the wind, the water, once everything is passed, we're golden from there. We'll figure it out. We do have family in Jamaica that we can go to, so we're not worried about that. We just want to make it through the initial storm and make sure it's passed.
And of course, you're looking out for your family, and I understand this was supposed to be a celebratory time, a family birthday, a chance to bring people together. I imagine that has changed.
Yes, definitely. My mom turned 60. We came to celebrate her, and it happens.
Well, I know the sentiments will be there regardless of the atmosphere, and thankfully you have a terrific attitude about getting through this. And you've helped us by giving us just a sense of what it's like to be in it, and certainly to have a very happy occasion upended a bit by Melissa. So thank you, Peter. Please stay safe. We will check back in with you. And thanks for letting us know what your experience has been. And happy birthday to your mother.
No problem. You're welcome.
We'll, of course, be following all of this closely. We'll bring you any major updates as they come along. And up next, we will shift gears here. There is breaking news in the Middle East as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu orders immediate strikes on Gaza, accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire agreement. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We're following news, this time out of the Middle East, where explosions were seen in the skies over Gaza tonight after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu ordered Israel's military to launch, quote, immediate and powerful airstrikes on Gaza. The Prime Minister's office is accusing Hamas of violating the ceasefire agreement by firing on Israeli troops and failing to return bodies of deceased hostages. An Israeli military official tells NBC News that Hamas attacked an Israeli-controlled area in Rafah today. But Hamas says it has no connection to the incident and that it will postpone the scheduled handover of a body believed to be an Israeli hostage that was found in an underground tunnel today due to Israel's actions. Joining me now from Tel Aviv is NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley. And Matt, we've talked about how fragile these agreements have been that have brought some measure of peace. And is Israel considering this any kind of violation of the ceasefire?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely, the Israelis are certainly saying this is a violation of the ceasefire. Hamas is certainly saying that the Israeli airstrikes are a violation of the ceasefire. And you're right, it is very much a fragile ceasefire. But there's another way, sort of a glass half full way of looking at this, too, which is that this similar sequence of events happened last week. And now, 18 days into this ceasefire, we can look at it in terms of how much this ceasefire has actually weathered, how much it's survived and endured. The fact is that it's still going, and both sides have been signaling, not as loudly as they've been signaling their anger, but have been signaling nonetheless that they are committed to stay with this ceasefire and seeing it through. Both Hamas has said that they are willing to release all of these hostage remains and that they're trying their best to find them. The Israelis, in conversations that I've been having with people who are informed about this, they've been saying that, you know, this is kind of just putting Hamas on notice and that they're hoping to abide by the ceasefire going forward.
Do you get a sense that there are political pressures at work here on Netanyahu to try to resume the war with Hamas?
Yeah, there's a substantial political pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to continue the fight against Hamas. You know, one of the things that this ceasefire left out in terms of Netanyahu's goals in fighting Hamas was Hamas's complete destruction. Now, for a lot of folks here in Tel Aviv and elsewhere in Israel who have been fighting to see this war end and seeing the release of all those hostages, it was worth it to see the hostages, especially those 20 living ones, released, even if it meant that Hamas was going to remain in power. But as we're seeing more and more violations, even though Hamas has denied that they had anything to do with that RPG attack that you mentioned earlier, it looks as though Hamas is it is still a governing and fighting force in the Gaza Strip. And some of these right-wing members of Benjamin Netanyahu's very right-wing cabinet have been pushing and pushing for Israel to return to war in the Gaza Strip and basically finish the job against Hamas. But like I said, so far it looks as though Netanyahu has been parrying those complaints. He is still pushing to stay out of the full fight in the Gaza Strip, even though we're now seeing multiple airstrikes across Gaza tonight.
And we know that it's been a top priority for Israel to see the return of deceased hostages, important for their families. We talked a little bit about a plan for one of those exchanges today that did not happen. Do you have a sense of how the conversation around deceased hostages may go forward?
Yeah, there were a lot of conversations that were going on during the negotiations before the ceasefire came into place about how it was going to be difficult for Hamas to unearth these bodies. And now there's an Egyptian team who's in there trying to help Hamas unearth those bodies as well as the Red Cross. But, you know, we saw that the Israelis released a video today that they said showed Hamas faking an excavation of one of these bodies. And the video that was shot by drone showed a body that was being dragged out of a building, Israel said, by Hamas operatives, buried, and then they came back hours later and discovered it in front of the Red Cross so as to release the body. This was the body that you mentioned, one that had been already recovered by the Israelis, so it was partial human remains, and one that doesn't count, as far as the Israelis are concerned, to be among those 13 still in the Gaza Strip. So there is a real conversation about whether or not what Hamas is saying is true. People that I've been speaking to who are informed about these conversations say that there is a real conviction among the Israeli top brass that Hamas is lying, that they know where these bodies are hidden, and that they're just playing a game. They're playing tricks in order to maintain their leverage over Israel as this ceasefire goes on.
And such a complex and painful part of a very difficult and enduring story. Matt Bradley, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And we will be taking a break. And then Vice President J.D. Vance huddles on with Republicans on Capitol Hill as the government shutdown enters its 5th week. The latest fallout is coming up next, so please stay with us. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We're keeping count, and it's day 28 of the government shutdown, still with no end in sight. Today, a stopgap funding bill failed in the Senate for the 13th time. Vice President J.D. Vance joined Republicans on Capitol Hill in a show of unity, telling reporters the administration apparently has found a way to keep paying the military troops for another pay cycle.
I believe that we can continue to pay the troops on Friday. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to pay everybody because we've been handed a very bad hand by the Democrats. This is one of the reasons why you've seen some layoffs in the federal workforce. We do think that we can continue paying the troops, at least for now, but we've got food stamp benefits that are set to run out in a week. We're trying to keep as much open as possible. We just need the Democrats to actually help us out a little.
This comes as Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy held a press conference with air traffic controllers who missed their first paycheck today. Duffy assuring Americans it is still safe to fly, but warning that delays and cancellations could mount as the shutdown drags on.
And I would tell you that, yes, it's as safe today as it was 2 months ago. It's safe. Is that if they don't have the right staffing levels, or if there's distractions in towers, they will slow down the landings and departures in different airports across the country. And what that means for the American people is that means more delays, or that means more cancellations.
Meanwhile, Democrats find themselves facing a delicate balancing act of sticking to their demand on health care and sticking up for federal workers after the largest union representing federal workers called for an immediate end to the shutdown.
Look, AFTU is a great union. They're there to represent their members and the members' interests. We're going to be able to take care of a lot of these government employees. What we're not going to be able to deal with is the fact that 24 million families, American families, are going to have higher insurance rates starting January 1st.
Federal workers, for the most part, are saying, hang in there. They feel like they've been abused virtually on a daily basis since this administration.
So it's not that their statement isn't going to change how you vote.
Let's see how the week plays out.
And joining me now from Capitol Hill is Julie Sirkin. And Julie, good to be with you today. And the vice president was there. Do you get a sense that this was really about trying to move the ball in a policy way, in a path toward reopening, or was this more about presenting a message of unity?
I think a little bit of both, Kelly. Obviously, with the president overseas, the vice president, I'm told, was intended to come here and sort of rally the troops to make sure that Republicans were united, to brief them as well on some of the work that the president's doing overseas. But the vice president also got some heat in the room. We're told by two sources that he was peppered with questions, for example, on Argentinian beef, the idea that the administration would buy beef, the U.S. would buy beef from Argentina, causing a lot of backlash from farmers. He got so many questions, we're told, Kelly, that at one point Vance even quipped and said, all right, any other questions on other topics, guys? He also addressed the president's tariffs. Of course, there's going to be a vote addressing the Brazil tariffs in particular later today. He essentially urged Republicans to stay together on that vote, though we do know that some Republicans would break. And then, of course, on the shutdown question, the most notable thing that came up in that discussion was, of course, when Republicans pressed him on any piecemeal options that they could have to address some of these, not only paying the troops, but other programs that are expiring. And so far, Vance told Republicans to stay strong and to not pass any piecemeal bills to really put the pressure on Democrats to reopen the government.
So you track this sort of wins each day of, is there a chance for a break? Is something going to move in one direction or another? Do you get a sense that we're any closer to ending this shutdown than we were a month ago?
You know, notably from Senator Mark Warner, who represents a state that has the largest population of federal workers, I think he's somebody who's very key to watch. He did kind of leave the door open a little bit yesterday. You heard some of what he had to say there. He said very briefly, and then he seemed to walk it back. We'll see what happens later this week, because that statement from the union representing those federal workers is a big deal for Democrats. Some of them privately thought about perhaps changing strategy, changing course, especially when Americans start to run out of food benefits. But certainly federal workers not getting paid, especially a union that traditionally, historically supports Democrats, is something that they'll listen to. But I have to tell you, after today, I'm back to feeling like they're really both dug in. Certainly not before the elections that we have next week in New Jersey and Virginia are Democrats going to let up on this, because this is something their base wants them to fight on. Even Warner, who represents all of those federal workers that are struggling right now, said that they indicated to him that they want them to keep fighting. And so far, Democrats, as echoed by Leader Schumer today, want the president at the table negotiating. Again, Leader Thune, who spoke to the president last night, he did share with us that that's something the president is willing to do, but Democrats are just not buying it.
You referenced the political calendar there, and we've also had some news on a long-promised investigation from Republicans from the House Oversight Committee. And the chair of that committee, James Comer, released a report asserting that President Biden's use of the autopen was illegal, they claim, because of mental decline. What does this report say? What do we know?
So this was a months-long investigation led by the Republican-led House Oversight Committee. This has been a long-time pet project of James Comer, the chair of that committee. He has long alleged, sort of parroting the talking points that we've heard from the administration, from the president, even when he was on the campaign trail, suggesting that the pardons that the President Biden signed were somewhat invalid or somehow invalid because of President Biden's suggested mental decline. And so this was an investigation that they had long previewed. They interviewed more than a dozen former White House and Biden officials. In this report, they published it. They released transcripts of those interviews that they held behind closed doors, including some video. And they concluded, as they referred in a letter to the Attorney General Pam Bondi, that those pardons signed by President Biden using an autopen, very standard practice, by the way. President Trump does it. James Comer does it. A lot of Republicans do it in official matters. President Biden used it as well. And so they allege that all of those pardons are somewhat invalid or somehow invalid because of President Biden's decline. Though I will tell you, very crucially, none of the aides that testified before the panel behind closed doors said that they noticed any kind of cognitive decline here. But again, this is something that DOJ is going to continue examining, Kelly.
Well, Julie, your reporting sort of tees up our panel here, so a thank you to you. And I'll introduce our panel now. Shelby Talcott, who is the White House correspondent for Semaphore, Antoine Seawright, Democratic strategist and CEO of Blueprint Strategy, and Stephen Hayes, editor and CEO of The Dispatch. So plenty for us to talk about. Let me start with you, Shelby. The Comer Committee has really been focused on the use of the autopen during the Biden years. They've put out this big report. What next steps do you envision? They've made their case. The Attorney General is talking about reviewing it. Where does this go?
I think it's an open question. And as you said, the Attorney General is reviewing it. And I think that's really notable because it is, you know, the Attorney General has been handpicked by Donald Trump, of course, but she is a key Trump ally. And we have seen in other cases how she has gone further. The DOJ has gone further than perhaps they would have in the past because it is something that Donald Trump wants. And so something that I'm keeping an eye out for is, do we see Donald Trump start publicly truth socialing, urging Pam Bondi to perhaps bring charges or do something further? Now, when I've talked to legal experts, it's a difficult bar to pass. But certainly the fact that she is even looking into it is extremely notable. And this is something that the Trump administration has been focused on from day one of the administration. I mean, they have you go down the wall of presidents, and in place of President Biden is the autopen picture.
So much of this, Antoine, is about messaging. The power of pardon is pretty absolute. And Joe Biden has said in the time that he was in office, as well as since he left the White House, that these were his decisions. He made them, and he defends that use, legal use of the autopen. Is this going to pick up steam, or is it really just about taking a shot at the former president?
Well, this report is not worth the government paper it's printed on. This is a precedent or a practice that's been used for 70-plus years in this country. And it's ironic that the committee chairman himself has used the autopen as a practice and a pattern of behavior. At the end of the day, this is simply a manufactured outrage, selective manufactured outrage by this do-nothing majority Congress who wants to distract the American people from the disastrous economic policies or lack thereof, and it came at a very convenient time. And so I think this is a big nothing burger. The American people will not bite it, will not buy it or eat it.
Stephen, let me turn to you. And President Trump, who has exercised the pardon power as well, was asked about a notable pardon recently involving the head of Binance. I want to play a bit of that, what he said, and how it might reflect on his thinking about how he uses the pardon power. Let's take a look at that.
Biden, what he did is they knew, I don't think he knew, but somebody knew. I don't think Biden had a clue about anything, if you want to know the truth. They gave a pardon, but Biden didn't know about it.
It's the people that worked the autopen, the people that signed all those signatures illegally because he had no idea what was going on.
Today you pardoned the founder of Binance. Can you explain why you chose to pardon him, and did it have anything to do with his involvement in your family's?
Which one, who is that?
The founder of Binance. He has an involvement in your own family's crypto
one, yes,
business.
I believe we're talking about the same person because I do pardon a lot of people. I don't know. He was recommended by a lot of people. A lot of people say that, are you talking about the crypto person? A lot of people say that he wasn't guilty of anything.
So there was a combo there, obviously critical of President Biden's use, and then perhaps having a little difficulty explaining his use of the power in terms of, did he recognize a person he pardoned, and what process did he use? He talked about others telling him he should do it. What do you make of this? Is it hypocritical?
I mean, the crypto person. The best defense Donald Trump has of the pardoning of the founder of Binance is that it was an autopen. He would be smart to say this was an autopen, because otherwise it's such obvious and rank corruption, he has no defense. It's a disgraceful pardon. It never should have happened. Look, I think this is the kind of story that when you talk to people outside of Washington, they look at this and they think, this place is disgusting. Yeah. Because, of course, James Comer uses an autopen. Talk to members of Congress. You've had conversations with members of Congress. They don't even know what bills they've sponsored. So they're going to be in sort of high dudgeon about Joe Biden doing this. On the other hand, you have to say, Julie referenced all of the Biden people who testified before Congress and said they didn't even notice President Biden's cognitive decline. Well, everybody else in the country noticed it. Well, I wasn't in meetings with them, but we noticed it when we watched TV. So everybody is basically full of it in this moment, and it's one of the reasons that people are as disgusted as they are about Washington.
Does this take on any different impact We're in a shutdown, and this is a very partisan political use of the committee's time. A lot of cost associated with all these depositions, all this work. To a questionable end, we don't know, other than making a strong political message that Republicans want to make. Do you think this could sort of blow back on Republicans at all?
I think there's always the potential, but I think the question is, are Democrats going to be able to effectively message? And so far, we've seen pretty consistently that the Democratic Party has struggled to message against Republicans. And so in this case, I think with everything else also going on, obviously, President Trump is overseas. There is the shutdown. There is the Argentine beef issue. There's so many other issues going on that for Democrats to take this and effectively message this, I think would take a lot, and we haven't seen them be able to do that this time.
I don't think Democrats should back debate. I think we have to stay focused on what everyday Americans want. And right now, everyday Americans want us to stay focused on bread and butter issues. Today, that issue is health care. And as we barrel towards November 1st, that issue is SNAP. 42 million Americans. And if you think about just raw numbers, 18.2 million Americans in states that Donald Trump won will be affected by these ACA tax enhancements credits. 76% who enjoy those subsidies are in red states that Donald Trump's won. That's what the argument is all about. Bread and butter issues that matter to the everyday Americans, and this is not one.
Why is that not breaking through? Or do you think it is and lawmakers aren't listening?
I think it's breaking through because the American people clearly are in favor of increasing those subsidies or keeping those subsidies in place by the mere fact of the data indicates 78%. Think about this. An American family who's paying $8,000 a year for health care, if these subsidies are not increased, that cost goes up to $24,000, perhaps $32,000. Already in economic security being the top of mind issue for Americans, that blows this out of the water. You add on to SNAP benefits being cut or paused on November 1st, that impacts Trump voters, small-town America, in a big way.
Well, Stephen, you know a lot about the rural American voter who might have likely paid their political moment to President Trump by voting for him. And they're going to feel this pinch. What do you think that can do in terms of, we're already seeing some, certainly senators, Josh Hawley of Missouri has been talking about it. Do you see that the economic pain is going to move Republicans?
I mean, it's a good question. We've seen that rural voters, in particular rural Trump voters, have shown great patience with Donald Trump, whether it's through the tariff questions and now these issues, before they turn on him. So I'm not sure that anybody should count on them flipping on Donald Trump. Having said that, I think this is most likely to be determined finally by an externality, whether it's ground stops on the airplanes, whether it's people not getting their SNAP payments. There is likely to be outside pressure that leans more heavily on one party than the other that gets the party to cave. You're already seeing, through Julie's reporting and the things that we've been discussing, people sort of making moves to be prepared to, Republicans would do these one-off votes because they're feeling a little pressure here. Democrats would maybe cave in these other situations because they're feeling a little pressure here. They're anticipating, I think, further external pressure and getting ready to sort of pivot.
And I think that's where we have to leave it today. But I think what we really know is that it is about that combination of
November
real world
1st, a very
and the election
date.
Yes.
The marketplace opens up and SNAP benefit stops. Yes. All eyes on November 1st.
And so we'll be tracking all of that in terms of the benefits running out, the election where votes are cast, and people having to get their health care. Thank you for a great panel discussion, Shelby, Antoine, Stephen. Appreciate it very much. Still to come, if it is Tuesday, we are certainly looking at the election day that we've just hinted at and the marquee race for New York City, and that one is tightening. We'll have Steve Kornacki tracking the very latest. Keep it here on Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. We're now just 1 week from Election Day, which will be the first time we hear from voters across the country since President Trump's historic election. And one of the most closely watched races is the New York City mayor's race. And a new poll shows that race may be tightening. NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki joins me from the big board, my favorite place to see him. What are the key findings of this poll, Steve?
Yeah, it's interesting, Kelly. Take a look. This is a Suffolk University poll here in New York City. Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic nominee, continues to lead over Andrew Cuomo, 44-34. Republican Curtis Sliwa at 11% now. Still a lead for Mamdani, but a couple things are interesting about this. Number one, he's under 50% in this poll. He's well under 50% in this poll. And that gap between Mamdani and Cuomo, you see, is 10 points here. Take a look at what this same pollster found the last time they polled. This was a month ago in September. Back then, they found basically a 20-point lead. They find Mamdani's lead over Cuomo coming down in half over the last month. Now, what's happened over the last month, of course, is back in September, there was another candidate in this race, the incumbent mayor, Eric Adams. He has since dropped out, and you can see pretty clearly here that his support has shifted over to Cuomo. I mean, look at this. Mamdani really isn't losing much ground, but he's not gaining any ground over the last month. He is stuck there in the mid-40s. It's Cuomo who's gone up. Sliwa, the Republican, is up only 2 points. So really, this is where the movement's been. And it suggests the possibility here. Are there limits? What are the limits to the appeal of Mamdani in New York City? Are there voters who have reservations about him, who are outright resistant to him? His support, again, he's the Democratic nominee in an overwhelmingly Democratic city, and he's still polling here in the mid-40s, and the movement is consolidation below him. So it does raise a question, as you look towards next week, if there is further consolidation here of the non-Mamdani side of this. If Cuomo can build more support coming from Sliwa, coming from undecided voters, could he get this closer from 20 to 10 into single digits, into competitive range? Take a look at one of the key findings within the poll here, the age divide. Younger voters, those under 45 years old, older voters, and look at this chasm. A 40-point Mamdani advantage over Cuomo on the younger side. Cuomo actually beating Mamdani on the older side. Now, in the primary, Democratic primary, when Mamdani beat Cuomo, there was a lot more young voter participation than expected. There was a lot less older voter participation than expected. One thing that's out there right now, some of the data from the early voting in New York City, this stuff can be skeletal, this stuff can be misleading, but just pointed out, some of that early voting data is showing an electorate that is much older this time around than it was in the primary. We'll see if that holds up, but that's relevant because that is something Cuomo needs to have happen. If Cuomo's going to have a chance here, he needs there to be a lot more older voters in this general election than there were in the primary. So there's some volatility here, I think. A week to go. This is when the attacks get more intense. The scrutiny intensifies here. And to the extent there are some reservations about Mamdani among the voters in New York City, is there room for more consolidation? That is what the poll suggests is worth keeping an eye on, Kelly.
So great to have that info, and gives us a lot to watch. Steve, thank you so much. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now, and the news continues here on NBC News Now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.